Hey, what's up, house groups? I hope you are having an awesome night and enjoying some delicious food together for dinner church this week. On Sunday, Mike, he talked to us about the paper wall of work in our lives. And if it's going to be defined as a paper wall, I think it's fair to say that at the very least it's a hardy card stock. We're not talking tissue paper here, but it really is like tragic that 80% of people say that work is a significant source of stress in their lives. Like people are losing sleep over their jobs. And I mean, it makes sense, I guess. Like work, it's such a significant part of what we do and how we spend our time. And if we're spending roughly like 8 hours a day over 40 years of our lives doing something that creates significant anxiety in our lives, like if we're doing that, we're completely missing some of the things that God has for us. And now, before you get like internally mad that the pastor's on the screen telling you about how you should view your job, let me just be the first to admit, like I likely don't understand your job very well. I've had 3 real jobs in my life. In high school, I worked at Pump It Up, the inflatable party zone, and was essentially a lifeguard for bouncy inflatables and cleaned up kids' puke. And in college, I worked at an Alzheimer's residential care facility and took care of them, which was an absolute blast. I loved that job. But then out of that, I just started interning for Mike at our church in Minnesota and have been doing kind of some sort of ministry work ever since. Like I haven't worked full-time outside of the church in almost 10 years. And so you're probably 100% right when you think that I have no idea what it's like and what you go through on a daily basis. I'm like struggling with questions like, am I doing something that matters? Like, am I good at this? Do I like the people I work with? Or is this job or company even going to be around in the next 5 to 10 years? Like, I've had a bunch of different conversations with people who struggle to find significance and satisfaction in their work. Like, that's real, and it can be haunting. But let me just say, that is absolutely something I understand. Like if you've ever thought to yourself, like, man, I just wish I could be doing something that made more of an impact, like ministry or whatever, like, let me just be the first to say that's likely not the answer. I mean, it could be, but probably not. And here's why. You could have the greatest mission in the world, like living a life with purpose that exists to help people meet Jesus and just take steps closer to him and watch this insane transformation take place in their lives and still find yourself asking those questions. Like, am I doing something that matters? Am I even good at this? Do I like the people I work with? Is this thing even going to be alive in the next 5 to 10 years? Why do we ask ourselves those questions? I think it's just because we're human. I cannot tell you how many times that we as a church staff and people, myself, have gotten angry emails or have things breaking down, or maybe even life just happens and those thoughts race through your head like, man, I could probably sell insurance, right? Like, I could do it. I could learn, figure it out. At least then when I clock out, right? And I think oftentimes it boils down to a case of misplaced value. And we don't always like admitting that, but when our value is tied up in our circumstances and our production, it's never going to be enough. It's never going to add up. It's never going to be fully satisfying. But it's tricky because Mike said on Sunday that the definition of work is effort that creates value. Like work is effort that creates value. But value for who? Like, are you measuring the value you're receiving or the value that you're creating? Like, I think that's the big question, because no matter who you are or what you do for a living, you're doing something that creates value for people. Or at least you can be. Like, maybe it's not about the product you produce, but the presence that you provide. Like, you have an opportunity every single day to serve the creator of the universe through the work that you're doing. Like maybe you're changing diapers and wiping away tears and creating these meaningful experiences for your kids, or maybe you're closing $1 million deals, or maybe you're building or taking phone calls or doing taxes, selling insurance, checking people out at Hy-Vee, giving dance lessons, running your own business. Like maybe you're unemployed right now and you're looking for a job. Like no matter where you're at from 9 to 5, your value has less to do with the product you produce and much more to do with the presence that you provide. And I say that as a pastor who has had seasons where I wonder if what I'm doing is even making a difference at all, which leads me to believe that no matter where you work, like if your identity has to do with your glory more than God's glory, it's probably a good time for just a little bit of a heart check. And now raise your hand if you just like a good heart check self-analysis. Like you can't get enough of it. Like no, of course not. No one likes admitting that maybe they've let their this high production, self-gratifying culture we live in slip into our hearts. But my challenge to you this week, like whether it's here at house groups or not, is to have just this honest moment and ask yourself where you're finding your value. Like, I think it's so important that we do this, because then, like, if we're able to place our value in our service instead of our success, and work for the glory of God instead of the glory of self, like, then when we start to ask ourselves those questions, like, am I doing something that matters? And am I even good at this? Do I like the people I work with? Or is this job or company even going to be around in the next 5 or 10 years? Like, the answers, they don't need to send us into a spiral, but instead give us this motivation to be a light in the world around us. And it doesn't have to be by over-spiritualizing everything and only like speaking to people through Bible verses or whatever. Like, it's usually simply by living into your creative purpose and doing what you're good at well. Just like Mike did on Sunday, I want to leave us with this quote from Martin Luther, where he said, "The maid who sweeps her kitchen is doing the will of God just as much as the monk who prays, not because she may sing a Christian hymn as she sweeps, but because God loves clean floors." And the Christian shoemaker does his Christian duty not by putting little crosses on the shoes, but by making good shoes, because God is interested in good craftsmanship. Like, God, he has a purpose for you right where you are. I know it's not always easy to see. It's not always easy for me to see. But let tonight be a reminder of this truth so that we might be the light of the world that we just so desperately need. Instead of giving us motivation, I was so close. This, because then, like, if we're able to place our value in our service instead of our success, and service instead of our success, and work for the glory of God instead of the jeepers. I'm dead. Now, raise your hand if you like.
Wow.
I can't read. I stopped being able to read. Oh, is this even making a difference?
I made a mistake once.
Jeepers. Okay.